public safety concerns amid international conflict, social media legislation being considered in Congress, and America's talking. This is the Center Square Daily for Monday, March 2nd, 2026. I'm your host, Greg Bishop. The United States and Israel conducting strikes on Iran in Operation Epic Fury over the weekend, with Iran's Ayatollah Ali Khamenei being killed. Iran retaliating against American bases and Israel as CENTCOM quashing Iranian claims of certain missile strikes. Those are just some of the headlines you'll find from over the weekend at thecentersquare.com. Now, President Donald Trump gave several updates over the weekend, and this morning at an unrelated ceremony, he provided another update on U.S. casualties and how long he expects the conflict could go on.
Today, we grieve for the 4 heroic American service members who have been killed in action and send our love and support to their families. In their memory, we continue this mission with ferocious, unyielding resolve to crush the threat this terrorist regime poses to the American people, and a threat indeed it is. We also projected 4 weeks to terminate the military leadership, and as you know, that was done in about an hour, so we're ahead of schedule there by a lot.
The president said that the U.S. is capable of going much longer than 4 or 5 weeks, with some lawmakers vowing to work at getting a vote on the War Powers Act amid those Iranian strikes. U.S. Representative Thomas Massie out of Kentucky is working with Ro Khanna out of California, and they're working to force a vote in Congress once it returns to session. The War Powers Act requires hostilities to terminate 60 days after a vote unless Congress authorizes an extension or formally declares war. Now let's get to the latest from the ground in Washington, D.C., with the Center Square's Washington, D.C. Bureau Chief, Sarah Roderick-Fitch, who's standing outside the White House this morning. And just after you left a ceremony where the president was speaking, Sarah, you've been at this since the strikes occurred over the weekend. What are some of the latest things that taxpayers really need to focus on here?
Well, I think public safety here in the United States is probably key at this point. Secretary Hegseth said this morning that there are concerns for sleeper cell terrorist groups here in the United States, stateside. But overall, I think as far as we're concerned is how long is this operation going to take? The president is saying they're ahead of schedule, but he's also saying that they will stay as long as necessary. So we really don't know at this point how long it's going to be. He's giving sort of a timeline of about 4 weeks possibly. But he did indicate this morning, it was during the Medal of Honor ceremony and held in the East Room at the White House, that the leadership of the Iranian leadership that they were targeting was taken out in about an hour. And we kind of heard nearly 50 Iranian top leadership gathered Saturday morning their time, Iranian time, and sort of they took that as an opportunity to go after them. Of course, Israel has sort of been focusing on going after the Iranian leadership, while the United States has been focusing on taking out the Iranian, their any of their nuclear sites, ballistic stuff, their military. The president just did announce, which was new, that an additional Iranian naval ship was taken out. That brings the total to 10 naval ships now that have been destroyed. So it seems, I can't tell you exactly what the number is, what they have, what the Navy, their Iranian Navy is, but that's a pretty significant number at this point. So I think really kind of looking at the timeline, and then also really sort of the impacts here in the United States and what this could lead to potentially.
Yeah, and absolutely. The question is now among local officials as to what kind of threats there may be, as Iran's known as a exporter of terrorism, right? I mean, they use their funds from oil proceeds to give to terrorist groups that have caused problems all across the world, especially in the Middle East. But we've got FBI Director Kash Patel saying that they're fully engaged in the situation overseas and keeping an eye on what that means for public safety here locally. What are you hearing?
Well, there was that attack over the weekend. It's looking like it was a terror attack. All signs are pointing to it. The Joint Terrorism Task Force was assigned to it in Austin, Texas. They're shooting where three three people were killed. That looks like that was probably going to be a lone sort of thing, but they are treating that as a terrorist attack. But yes, especially here in DC, there's been a heightened alert. Military bases across the country, of course, in the world, are also on heightened alert. And it is happening here. Secret Service is also putting, extra patrol. There's a little bit more happening here in DC. A little bit more. You see definitely some more police on the streets, although it is a very secure. It's probably the most secure places in the country or in the world. I know U.S. Capitol Police is also up there patrol as far as members of Congress, Capitol. But there is a concern, here in the United States, Hezbollah, which is really kind of one of the number one terror proxies of Iran. And they have been known to be here in the United States and having a lot of cells that are a little bit more organized. They've been able to come up, through the border, Central and South America, having sort of a presence down there. That kind of is a major concern, and they are directly related to Iran. That's where they've gotten their funding. They are actually a Lebanese terrorist organization, but they have a heavy presence here in the United States. And while sort of that hasn't been talked about, but that is something of concern, locally. And I know that the administration, Director Patel, even the Department of War are paying close attention to, possible attacks. I think that they're kind of, worried and concerned that there could be some, maybe more that are imminent at some point.
And I think too, the issue of lone attacks, right? Somebody who may be inspired by certain actions overseas, just taking it upon themselves, might not be a conspiracy, so to speak, but it could just be an individual person. And Kash Patel, the FBI director, posting over the weekend, encouraging people to call the FBI with anything that they see as possibly suspicious. And that number 1-800-CALL-FBI, or you can go to tips.fbi.gov and you can file tips that way. You also have Kristi Noem with the Department of Homeland Security, an organization, Sarah, I know you know this, but was started after a terrorist attack in September 11th, 2001. DHS coming about because of that, and she posted over the weekend. They also continue to work with federal intelligence and law enforcement partners as they continue to monitor things closely. Sarah, this sounds like it's going to be a storyline for the next few weeks here, as the president indicated, 4 weeks possibly, but even beyond that, what's going to happen next year?
Well, it'd be interesting thing you talk about the DHS. One of the other issues is going to be a battle this week and Republicans in Congress are pushing Democrats because, as you know, there's a partial government shutdown right now, but they're not funding DHS, and that is a huge problem. So there are agencies that are working and now being told basically you need to be upping your game and you need to be in a higher alert. And here we are now with this huge conflict and heightened security alert. And a lot of these agencies are not being funded. And so that is now a push as well. Republicans are going to be going ahead and pushing that, as a lot of Democrats are going to be pushing for a resolution for the Wars Act. They're going to be pushing for that. But also, since it said Republicans are going to be pushing, hey, we need to get this back. This is now, very important to get these agencies funded. They're kind of saying, hey, enough of the politics. Lives are sort of at stake here.
Considering the TSA, the Coast Guard, these are
and the Coast Guard is the Coast Guard is also, that is considering a branch of the military as well. So they are also overseas too. They are not just here in the United States. They are deployed all over the United States. I've been in Japan. They're in Japan. They are in that region, also kind of guarding things. So they are now going without pay. And right now, at this time, that's very crucial to get them paid, especially when you sort of need that morale and you need those people. So that will be a huge push that's going to be coming this week, probably later this week as well. So we'll see what happens with that.
But very interesting. Closely, no question about it. Sarah Roderick-Fitch from the White House here for the Center Square. Be safe, and we appreciate your time.
Thank you.
All right, some other headlines from over the weekend. Iranians clashing with protesters over those U.S. strikes. You had Iranian nationals celebrating the death of Iran's leader Saturday and clashing with protesters criticizing the Trump administration's military actions. As many as 50 Iranian nationals chanted, cheered, played music, They danced outside the White House Saturday, according to organizers, and several of them brought homemade signs. But alongside the Iranian people celebrating were protesters gathering to criticize the Trump administration. Law enforcement across the country still keeping an eye on possible terror threats. They are also keeping an eye on these types of protests. All right, so while we talk about public safety and people keeping an eye on the streets, amid that ongoing operation in Iran, parents back here at home, well, they're looking to enhance their family's safety when it comes to their children accessing social media online. And now for the Center Square Daily, let's talk with Progressive Policy Institute's Andrew Fung about online safety legislation that the U.S. Congress could be considering, and it deals with parents. Andrew, thanks for taking time with us today. What are you expecting Congress to tackle in the coming days?
Yeah, thanks for having me. Congress recently has advanced the broadest set of children's protections legislation that we've ever seen. It's been a bipartisan push, and there's been a number of big bills that are included in there. The biggest two things that we're looking for are one, modifications to COSA. This is the Kids Online Safety Act. This imposes a number of new regulations surrounding safeguards for kids, the way that platforms design the content that they show kids and the addictive nature of it, as well as restrictions and audits to keep track of the content that's being shown. The other big debate that we're seeing is around privacy. This is a big question around how kids' data is being sold, how it's being tracked, and whether it can be used for advertising. We're also seeing other smaller areas included in the bill around social media and drug use. And then the biggest part of this package really is around these two competing bills on age verification. And PPI has done some work, including some polling on this topic.
Now, with all of this, of course, we're talking about Congress, not about specific states. How big of a problem is it if we start seeing, and we're already seeing some of this, as I'm sure you guys are familiar with over there at the Progressive Policy Institute, the different patchwork of states setting up their own types of regulations? How problematic is that to a regulatory landscape in the United States?
It's a great question. This is a huge problem, really. What we often will see is that states will pass these individual bills with good intentions and individually well-designed ideas. But the problem is every state might do it a little differently. And when you combine them all together, it makes it really, really hard to get anything done. When it comes time for Congress to say, hey, let's establish a national law for this, individual states say, we like our own approach, we don't want to support another. And it really limits the ability for something to get passed down the road. So even if these states might be trying to design this legislation to keep their own kids safe, if we don't tackle it at the right time at the national level, it can really lead to worse outcomes for everyone involved.
And taking that beyond, the impact patchwork of states has for a country like the United States, the internet's global, right? How do you assess that situation with things that may be happening in the European Union, things that may be happening in China, how it impacts how children are influenced by social media or other technology companies in the United States?
It's a great question. Different regions have taken different approaches to this kind of regulation. The European Union has taken kind of a leading stance in putting in place strong protections for kids. But more broadly, a bigger question that we really face on this issue is the kind of content that's being created and the content that people are exposed to. Online, kids are now able to see content from all around the world in a way that wasn't possible even a few years ago. And really, the patchwork issue extends more globally. How do social media companies, how do parents, how do they navigate this landscape where, the rules might look completely different for a European family versus a Chinese family versus an American family. And really, unless we take a strong position on this now, it's likely to only get worse in the coming years.
Talking with Andrew Fung. He is with the Progressive Policy Institute, and soon in Congress, you guys are expecting markup on several pieces of legislation dealing with technology and children and parents being able to better control what their children see or how they access things online. What are some things parents need to know now outside of regulation? Are there things they can be doing to protect their kids?
Yeah, PPI recently did a study in consultation with Morning Consult, and we found that about 70% of parents felt like their kids weren't sufficiently protected online. Um, you know, Congress is considering these protections, which would really give parents tools to say, how do we control what kids are able to use online? What kind of apps are they able to download? What kind of content are they able to see? This really comes down to a question of who's liable for this. Um, Parents, with this upcoming legislation may get access to new tools that give them, can restrict the kinds of apps that their kids can download, or the types of websites they're able to visit. But there's really differing approaches on this subject. Parents, we found about 73% said they want continuous checks for age and making sure that content was appropriate. But the competing bills in Congress, the Kids Online Safety Act and the Parents Over Platforms Act, take differing approaches to this strategy. So that's something that we'll see Congress tackle in the coming days as they have to sort of pick between these two competing approaches.
Now, obviously, when you look at regulating an industry, there's going to be some criticism that overregulation is going to stifle any kind of new developments or advancements or things that could possibly make all of our lives easier. How do you balance that in Congress?
Yeah. A big concern is for small developers and the kind of small app makers, which make up a lot of the volume of content that we see online. Age verification is really important for keeping kids safe, but it also is difficult to do. It's not easy to tell how old someone is and to do it in a way that's safe and respectful of someone's data and someone's privacy. These two competing approaches have really taken different kind of pathways. PPI is supportive of the Parents Over Platforms Act because it kind of splits this responsibility across different parties. It says that app stores, the ones made by companies like Apple and Google, who have big teams, can do kind of the initial legwork to make sure that kids are the age that they say they are. Whereas smaller developers just need to make sure that the content is consistent with the age that they're given. In comparison, the ASAA, the competing bill, really takes an approach that puts all the onus up front on the time of download and doesn't have those same kind of continuous checks. So this creates a kind of disbalance with the share of responsibility, and really may have some harmful impacts on smaller companies and smaller app developers who want to continue to be able to make content without those kinds of onerous requirements on them.
We'll be watching closely in the days ahead as to what Congress does with the Parents Over Platforms Act and other potential regulations for technology companies. And we're talking with Andrew Fung, Progressive Policy Institute. Andrew, in Illinois, we have Governor J.B. Pritzker delivering his State of the State address, and he's looking to charge a social media fee to social media companies, looking to get $200 million just in Illinois taxes. What do you guys know about this, and what's your organization's thoughts?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting question. Companies states are looking to hold companies accountable for what they see are, risks that are posed by social media platforms. And this is a different question than what we face with the questions over, what kind of contents we show kids. This content is really, or this legislation would be much more focused on the financial side of things rather than, modifying the way that algorithms show kids content or, change what people are able to see. Chicago already has its own kind of individual level tax in place. So, this would be an expansion of that. But it really remains to be seen how those funds are used and what they might be put to use doing, to fit into this broader strategy of, states to kind of tamp down and keep kids safe.
Yeah, they're just going to put it into the general fund, and it's just going to be used to increase spending, or is it actually going to be used for a program? Or, we'll have to see how those details continue to wash out. Andrew Fung, Progressive Policy Institute, greatly appreciate you taking the time here with the Center Square Daily.
Thanks very much for having me.
Now it's time for America's Talking, with video clips from state houses across the country. And we start in Georgia, where State Representative Jason Ridley has House Bill 1454 impacting gun ranges, gun auctions, and even databases of who is carrying firearms.
Section 1 just strengthens the prohibition against creating a database of weapon carry license and sharing those. Section 2 prohibits municipalities from banning discharging firearms on a parcel of 10 acres or larger. Discharges are still subject to reasonable regulations such as the noise ordinance, and does not single out firearms, but they cannot be prohibited. Section 3 requires all municipalities that have seized firearms to auction them off once every 12 months, so they're not stockpiling them. And then the bill also allows citizens to directly bid on them. Currently, it's only for dealers. This will allow citizens to bid on it, but they still have to go through a dealer to receive the gun, so they still have to go through a licensed FFL.
While Georgia looks to work at relaxing some gun laws to increase Second Amendment rights, other states looking to clamp down on those, and those types of laws typically get litigated all the way up to the U.S. Supreme Court. The Supreme Court today declining to hear a felony gun possession case in the case Vincent v. Bondi Monday, challenged targeted laws banning individuals with certain felony convictions from possessing firearms. So we'll see where that story ends up. Meanwhile, this morning, the Supreme Court heard the case U.S. v. Himani, and that's centered around a Texas man who was charged with a felony after FBI agents found a pistol, marijuana, and trace amounts of cocaine in his house after obtaining a search warrant. That challenge is over whether or not nonviolent drug users have a Second Amendment right. Meanwhile, in Minnesota, State Budget Director Anna Ming discussed some budget impacts from tightening federal rules around social service safety net programs.
The most significant impact of the prepayment review process comes from the fact that we are receiving fewer bills from providers. Sometimes some have referred to this as cost avoidance. Through an analysis of claims that from both before and during the implementation of prepayment review, DHS estimates about 4% lower spending in these 14 services as a result of providers simply billing less. This cost avoidance is expected to decrease state spending by $75 million this biennium and $99 million in the next. This estimate is based on actual experience in the most recent quarter, and it's not an explicit measure of fraud. It may indicate that there's a deterrent effect of the new prepayment review process, but it might also be capturing savings related to broader conditions in both the service delivery sector or the broader economy.
Fraudulent use of those taxpayer funds remaining a critical point for those wanting to track and audit these types of funds in Minnesota. And that's definitely going to be a place to continue to watch closely. In Washington State, legislative staffer Tracy Taylor explained a controversial constitutional amendment that state is looking to possibly enact on the state's income tax.
Senate Bill 6346 imposes a 9.9% tax on an individual's receipt of income exceeding $1 million beginning in calendar year 2028. And it also provides that 7% of the revenues are dedicated to the city and county public defense services, expands the working family tax credit, increases the B&O tax credit for small businesses, increases the tax return filing threshold for B&O to $250,000, provides a sales and use tax exemption from grooming and hygiene products, expires the B&O surcharges on businesses with excess of $250 million per year, and repeals sales taxes on specified services that were enacted in Senate Bill 5814 beginning January 1st, 2030, and exempts individual income taxes from a statutory prohibition on state and local income taxes.
A lot of debates going to be had in Washington State about that proposal of taxing millionaires more. And that is America's Talking, with State House clips from across the country. From my studios in Central Illinois, I'm Greg Bishop. Be sure to join us back here Tuesday for more stories impacting you, the taxpayer, from around the country, only with the Center Square Daily.